Well, in two ways. First of all, I think, speaking generally, the best way to learn how to be a writer is to be a reader. And so that's something that most people who want to write do anyway, and certainly I'm one of them. But in terms of studying English at university or whichever, literature at university, I think it just allows you to read in a more critical way, sort of deconstructing novels. And with my own, I'm more aware of what I'm doing because I've looked so closely at novels from the past. I would have to say Victorian novels, most of all, English Victorian, 19th century, probably mostly because I really admire the dense structure that they have, the very vivid, rich sense of place, and the complicated relationships between the characters. And it's not that I try and emulate that in my own work, but I certainly have been inspired by it. In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. Yes, because it's very validating to know that if you want to be a storyteller, you need someone to tell the story to, and it's very rewarding to know that there are people who like what you're doing and who brought the story back to life for themselves. But it can also have its difficulties because when you go back to that blank screen, suddenly you're aware of people who are, wanting to know what's coming next, and that can make it more difficult to stay true to your own story. I'm a little bit of both. I do a lot of plotting and planning before I start. Months and months of scribbling and drawing graphs and plans, and really it's almost like writing a first draft in my head before I start. And I just seem to need that truth and belief in the story before I begin. But then once I start, of course, I come up against 1,000 other small problems that have to be solved before I get to the end. And in terms of superstitions or things I need, I have 2 small children, so I've learned to be able to write whenever and wherever I can. The only thing I can think of, and it could become a very expensive habit, is so far I've written every book in a different office because we've moved house and I've had a new place to write. So now with book 5, for the first time, I have to write it in the same office. I'm going to have to move house. It would be surreal and incredible for that to happen, and The Forgotten Garden has been optioned for a film, so maybe. But for me, I'm a book person. I love books, I love writing, so it's enough for me to create the book. Anything else that happens is just a bonus. I find England very inspirational to me as a person and as a writer. The landscape, the buildings, the history of the place. Whenever I fly the sort of 24 hours from Australia and land, I feel my senses are more alive when I land there. Not more complex, but when I started, I actually thought, yes, because I had 2 ideas, and I thought, I'll write The Secret Keeper because I think it's going to be pretty simple to write. And then I started, and it so wasn't simple. It became, one of the most complicated books that I've written. So just shows how well I know before I start. Yeah, it is, and it's a relationship I love writing about, as you can see from most of my novels, and it was one that's so central to this book. I mean, Laurel knows her mother so well, and yet there's this one shocking event that she's witnessed and for which she has no answers, and one that she's complicit in keeping secret. And so it really was the driving force of the novel, that her need to know what really happened. I am. I have the notebook in my bag over there. Oh, yeah, okay. I read a lot of fiction, but even more non-fiction, but I'll see how I go with fiction. Kate Atkinson's Behind the Scenes at the Museum is a wonderful book. Sarah Waters' The Night Watch, I love that book. I seem to always mention Atonement by Ian McEwan, and at the moment, the book I'm reading at the moment is called How England Made the English. And it's, of course, it's about how a landscape can shape a people, a whole nationality of people.